Hey, what's up? This is Sifu Kuttel, and in this video, I want to tell you what you can expect if you pick up this giant Zhan Ma Dao from LK Chen. This is the Tang Zhan Ma Dao, and it is a super cool sword. So let's talk about it. So when you look at this sword, you might be thinking, okay, this looks almost like a futuristic or a fantasy sword. It's got a very straight blade, it's very geometrical, angle grinds, it's got this long or a very deep groove, and it's got a cross guard. This almost looks like a mix between a Japanese sword and a European sword, and the only thing that looks distinctly Chinese is this ring pommel on the end. So it's very easy to think, okay, well, maybe this is just like a modern fantasy sword. But no, this is truly a historical sword, and it's a very rare one. You see, because Tang Dynasty blades were super, super special and expensive to the point where they were not allowed to be buried with people, which was something that people had done for ages. In fact, that's why we have so many existing Han Dynasty blades, which are over 2,000 years old, because typically they were buried with the person. So they were stored and sealed in tombs and preserved to this day. The same is not said for the Tang Dynasty, and this is because blades were very expensive to produce and they were made of some of the highest quality steel. But to understand that, you need to know about the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty, it was considered one of China's golden ages, and this was when it had the height of the Silk Road. There was good protection on the northern and southern borders, and also trade routes within the seas to the east. So there was a lot of different cultures imported and exported from China, and this goes for weaponry as well. And you can see this in other Tang Dynasty swords, like this one from LK Chen. This is the palatial Tang Dao. This is a perfect example of Persian influences that we can see in cross guards on the blade, a lack of actually having a ring pommel to a sword, and then also the two-point suspension system that was also from a Sassanid influence. So this is really interesting to see as well. Now, you'll also notice that this blade is also very straight blade. It's got the same kind of hard angle edge bevels that you can see on the big sword, and it doesn't really look like much of a Chinese sword, but this in fact was a normal sword that you would see in that time. Now, one of the other important imports that was coming from India at that time was steel, and this was a very high-grade steel. We call it Wootz Steel nowadays, but it was a very special blend to the point where blades made from Wootz Steel were more durable, held an edge longer, and were more flexible than other swords. It was a superior blend of steel, and unfortunately that's been lost to time between family secrets and forgings and possible just how things were made in the location and what was naturally a part of the ore and the materials that they were using at the time. But people have been trying to replicate it nowadays, and they're matching it, but nobody really knows how it was made so well and so consistent back in that time. So it goes without mention, a sword this big would cost a pretty penny. So that's something that you don't want to actually put into burials or tombs, because that could easily be raided and somebody could end up with a very, very nice sword and could potentially be an enemy of yours. Now, it is important to mention that in the Tang Dynasty, this sword was not referred to as a Zhan Ma Dao. That term didn't come into play until the later Song Dynasty, and that's a sword actually that I have also reviewed from LK Chen. I'll leave a link up above so you can check that one out too, and you can see how that blade is in compared to this one, because although it's very similar, it is a lot different than this one that you see here. So what did they call this if they didn't call it a Zhan Ma Dao? And was it doing the same type of work? Why didn't they call it that anyway? So first off, yes, they've had, in Chinese history, they had blades that were used as anti-cavalry blades in the same manner that a Zhan Ma Dao was used. It's just that the name was not the same. Typically, this would be something called just a Dao or a great sword, or by another name. Now, there is a mystery as to if this particular sword is a Mo Dao. Now, a Mo Dao is something that you see in historical records written down and how it was used, which was anti-cavalry as well. But there are not many pictures of it in illustrations or existing examples. So what somebody could say and how they described it could differ from record to record, and some are saying that it was a longer pole arm with a double-edged blade, something similar to a Han Dynasty Sha. So it's very difficult for them to say if that's a Dao at all, since it was still called a Mo Dao, but based off of how it was used, it could be a long blade with a longer handle than a typical broadsword at the time, or a typical Dao of the time. So you can't really call this one the Mo Dao. That's still up to mystery. We really don't know exactly what those looked like. But we do know that this exists because LK Chen was able to make this as a one-to-one recreation of an existing blade that came from the Tang Dynasty. Now, not only is that rare, but there was only one of 3 existing blades. And it was one of the only ones that was complete with the handle still attached. So this is a very special and rare sword. And it's really sad that we didn't know more about this particular sword, because I can tell you it is incredible once you get this in your hands. So let's talk about what you can expect if you get one of these from LK Chen. So when the sword arrives, you're going to receive the blade as well as a nice, simple vegan leather scabbard, which really isn't much for ornamentation. It does have a strap on it, so you can throw it over your shoulder and carry it around. I don't typically use this to carry it around. I actually have something else, which I'll mention at the end of the video. But I do like this because it at least protects the blade from the elements and also protects everything else from the blade when I'm not using it. Now, the blade itself is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm sure you've been looking at it this whole video so far. I mean, it's got very direct straight lines. It's very geometric looking, but it's got some excellent and dramatic bevel grinds, as well as this very deep, bold groove that goes all the way down to the guard. Now, the blade itself weighs just under 5 pounds or just over 2 kilos. So it is a hefty blade, and it does have some pretty good distal taper, pretty thick at the guard, and then it narrows down the closer that we get to the tip of the sword. Now, the guard itself is quite interesting. As I mentioned before, this came from more of a Western influence, could have been from the Sassanids or the Persians, but we have a really simple crossguard, but it is a nice crossguard in the sense that you have more protection over the fingers than you do over the thumb, and it's just a little bit thicker on the thumb side. Something that you may not be able to see from the video, but it is something you can see when you can look up close to it. The grip on the handle is a waxed cotton, and it's tightly wrapped to the point where it does not budge at all. I tried to move it a little bit just so I could see the handle underneath, and it took quite a bit of effort just to split these a little bit. So it's not something that comes apart during usage. You really have to work to move that, and I really like that about this one. It's a really comfortable grip. I think using the waxed cotton is one of my favorite grips from LK Chen swords. I think it's way better than the hemp wrapping of the Song Dynasty Zhan Ma Dao, and I think it is a little bit better than the typical cotton cord that's used in some of the other sword builds. Now, the shape of the handle is also really nice. The back of it is a little bit wider, so it tapers down towards the front so you can index where the blade edge is if you're not looking at it. It also has a taper from the guard to the pommel so you can feel that, and it also has a taper in this direction as well so you can really get a nice feel of where you're at on the handle with your other hand without having to look at it as well. Now, the fittings on this one are pretty much just the iron fittings that you're going to look at. I like this look. I think it's got a rustic look to it. It's not really blackened out. It looks like it's got some wear on it, but I think it's a beautiful look, especially when you have the bright steel of the blade that is just so brilliant. So altogether, I love the look of this. The grip is incredible. It feels good, gives you good leverage in motion. And honestly, once this thing is in motion, it is incredible. And that's really what I want to talk to you about in this video. You see, I didn't know how good this blade was until I was able to take it out and work with it at full speed. Now, sure, once you take this out of the box, you're going to be impressed with its heft. You're going to be, you can swing it around a little bit and move it, and you're going to feel really comfortable holding it. But it wasn't until I went out to film the video that I made earlier this year for LK Chen with this sword that I actually got to feel it at full speed in motion. And I have to say, this is like driving a supercar, right? You really don't know how well it handles and how impressive the engineering is until you put that pedal to the metal and you run it at full speed. And that's really when you know how superior the design is. I mean, I absolutely love this sword. And I can say with full confidence, this is my favorite of the choppers by LK Chen. I prefer to use this one when I practice the horse chopper set of Choi Li Fut. I think it works absolutely perfect for it. With the reach and the range, you can use both ends of the weapon for different techniques, and it just feels so good at full speed. I mean, I use this so much that even after filming, I took some time to work with it some more. And then when I came back, I continued to work with it in my apartment to the point where my hands were starting to blister. My hands were sore. And even beyond that, I went back to it again and again. And this fascination with it, it never faded. It only got worse. I love this sword and I love to use it whenever I can. For my recommendation, I would definitely say if you are in the slightest bit interested in the sword, to go for it and get it. I think as a traditional martial artist, if you do Chinese martial arts, this works really well as a horse chopper. You can also use it for some Miao Do or like a long-handled broadsword form. It works really well for that too. But I also want to mention too, I know I'm saying a lot about, oh yeah, get out there, use this thing full speed, full power, but keep safety as your #1 priority. If you're going to get this to practice for your forms training and take it out and work with it at full speed, full power, then I suggest you don't get the sharp version because this sword is extremely sharp. If you're going to get it for cutting, get the sharp version, but don't swing it around wildly because this one is so heavy, it's so sharp that even the slightest mistake is going to be severely punished. So you have to keep that in mind, be smart, and keep safety as your #1 priority. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I don't typically carry this sword out with just the strap and the scabbard. I think that just would draw too much attention. So when I take this out, I actually have a bag that I commissioned, and I got this off of Etsy, and I really want to recommend this and recommend this guy. His name is Hussein Yalcin, and I'll leave a link in the description down below to his shop. I gave him the specific dimensions that I wanted for the bag. So this was a custom order, but you can see it's a really nice bag. It's got a long hole for the zipper so that I can fit this sword as well as other long swords from LK Chen and actually have some space in there to carry it around. And it's not only unassuming when you're carrying this around, but it also keeps the sword protected just in case some weather starts happening. So I really like this bag. I recommend it if you're going to get a sword and you want to take it out like I do, like when I go out and film. This is what I carry it around in, and it's a great bag. So again, I'll leave a link in the description down below for that. But now you know how I bring my swords out when I go out to film. All right, so there you have it. Now, like I said, I love this sword, and I hope you do too. If you get one of these, go ahead and drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think of it. I know just because I like it, maybe not everybody does, but I've talked to a couple of people that have it and they think it's a beast as well. So let me know what you think of the sword, as well as anything that you want to add that I may have missed on the history or some of the specs for the sword or something that people may want to know before they get this. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is one of the coolest mystery swords of the Tang Dynasty that I've ever seen, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.